incredible fake news about Prince William. A lie that went around the world. Last week, we covered a sick pile-on by the media left against Prince William, calling him a racist for allegedly saying it was alien to see a war in Ukraine in Europe. That war was actually normal in Africa and Asia, but not Europe. Now, steering this along was Omar Scobie. He's a journalist very close to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Is their biographer, in fact. Well, it now turns out that Prince William said no such thing. Never mentioned Africa, never mentioned Asia, and said war in Europe was only alien to the young. Of course he hadn't forgotten World War II.
No, everyone's horrified by what they're saying. They're really horrified. And the news every day is just, it's almost infallible to actually witness it. So, you know, from our generation, it's very alien to see this happen in Europe. But we're all right behind you.
Joining me is Brendan O'Neill, political editor for the online magazine Spiked. Brendan, thank you for your time again, mate. What does this fake news tell you?
I mean, this is on one level, this is very shocking. On another level, it's not really surprising because this is how the woke set operates. This is how the identitarian set behaves. They are constantly accusing people of racism, even where no racism exists whatsoever. So what they've done to Prince William, they've defamed him as a racist. They made up comments that he didn't make. He didn't mention Asia or Africa. He didn't say war is something that happens over there to those people, not to us people in Europe. He said no such thing, and yet those claims went around the world. As you say, they were pushed by the pro-Harry and Meghan lobby in a very cynical way. But I think it also told us a bigger story about identity politics and its craven search for evidence of racism in every nook and cranny of society, even where it clearly doesn't exist. I think they owe Prince William a huge apology for this.
Yeah, well, good luck waiting for that, mate. Brendan, former British soldiers have volunteered to join the Ukrainians to fight for them. Here are some of them.
Basically, we're here because of the war crimes that are being committed.
You know, people need me here. We're going to wait, to be honest, and see what the situation is as we get further in. It's all going to depend on how well the Ukrainians are doing in different parts, and also, where they need us.
Brendan, the British government saying don't go, the Australian government saying don't go, it's a crime. Should people go?
Well, I think these men are incredibly admirable and they're putting their lives on the line to defend freedom in Ukraine. There's something really stirring and inspiring about that. Now, when it's actual British soldiers who are defying orders, it does become a bit tricky. They have been told by their superiors not to go to Ukraine, and it does open up a bit of a can of worms in terms of British boots being on the ground in a foreign war zone. But there are others who are not in the British military who are also going to Ukraine from around Europe, people who want to fight for freedom against the Russian onslaught. And there's something really inspiring about that, I think. You know, potentially a new international brigades on the side of the Ukrainian people. The thing that worries me far more than that, is that a sense of moral defeatism, I think, is creeping into some of the Western commentary on Ukraine. And there's now this idea that maybe it's time for Ukraine to call it a day. Maybe they should negotiate with Russia's concerns. Maybe they should give in to Russia's demands. There's this idea that this isn't really worth the fight. And I really disagree with that. This is worth fighting for, Ukrainian freedom. And I support the people from the West who want to go and join that fight and help the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, but I like the pure idiocy of the idea that if the Ukrainian Prime Minister or President suddenly says, oh, look, we're going to surrender, that it doesn't actually, that somehow everyone else will drop their weapons. This is a people's resistance. He wouldn't be able to keep going if the Ukrainian people themselves were doing the Molotov cocktails, volunteering, doing the territorial army bit. I mean, this is what what a lot of people of the left have always wanted. I thought, the people's movement, they've got it, except this one with guns. Meanwhile, look, let's change the temperature a bit, Brendan. John Cleese from Monty Python. He was at a thing in America, and he, a little chat, meet John Cleese, people on stage, American comics. He suggested, hey, British once were slaves. Never mind the anthem, Britons never will be slaves. They were slaves of the Romans and the Normans. Where are my slave reparations? Well, we read that the Hollywood audience gasped in horror and the mic was taken from him. What does this tell you?
Oh, this is a brilliant story. I mean, firstly, it tells us that John Cleese is doing some heroic work at the moment. He's really pushing back against wokeness. He criticizes cancel culture. He thinks political correctness has become incredibly humorless and authoritarian. So he's making some very strong arguments in recent times. But this incident, where he was basically shut down for suggesting that history is quite complicated and that all sorts of nations have been oppressed and all sorts of people have been oppressed too, it really demonstrates something that he mentioned actually in his comments, which is that there is now this competitive victimhood where everyone wants to be on the top of the oppression ladder. It's the oppression Olympics, basically, where you have to acknowledge certain people's oppression but ignore everyone else's. And I actually made a similar point at a university talk recently. I said, look, should I have reparations for the Irish famine, which caused incredible destruction for my ancestors not that long ago? And of course, there was huge outrage because you're not allowed to talk about certain historical incidents in this context. So I think he's really shone a light on the nastiness and the censoriousness of the oppression Olympics and the way in which the woke set don't want to talk about complex history.
Yes, well, as someone from Dutch background, what about my reparations from the Romans, the Franks, the Austrians, the Spaniards? Who hasn't invaded Holland? Poor old Holland. Brendan O'Neill, thank you so much for your time.